welcome to Let's Talk ASPM. My name is Mark Lambert, Chief Product Officer here at ArmorCode, and I'm joined by my good friend Karthik, who is our Chief Security and Trust Officer here at ArmorCode. How are you doing, Karthik?
Fantastic, Mark. We're about to get the spring started. Can't complain. Life is good.
Yes, indeed. The summer is almost upon us. So as we kind of like move forward in the year, let's start thinking bigger. Today, let's talk about where ASPM fits into your broader security ecosystem, specifically software security, of course. Where I come in, where my background is from an application security perspective. My background has been historically very code-centric, and as I've seen the adoption of ASPM, my observations over the last few years have really seen organizations looking further right, bringing in data from cloud, container, but also traditional, data-centric tools, and bringing them all together into one view to get a holistic view of your application security posture. It's not just about the code anymore. It's not just about the weaknesses. It's about the vulnerabilities and what have you. But let's take a step even higher than that, Karthik. Let's think about it from a CISO's perspective, as you're looking at a much broader ecosystem than just the code, and kind of like how do you see your kind of like your world coming down a little bit from kind of like that big view into the application security view?
Absolutely, Mark. I think in the world that we live in today, security is not just cyber, it's not just technology, it's broader than that, right? We're talking about risk and how security gets influenced within the broader ecosystem of the business or the enterprise or any government agencies for that matter, right? So risk touches a lot of aspects of it. That said, as we see the digital evolution, we're moving more and more application centric, right? Vis-a-vis, you could be a telecommunications company, and then you're talking about software-defined networking and software-based switches, right? If you could be a retailer and you're talking about everything is in the code as you move your products, say a logistics company, a manufacturing company, a lot of the environment that these enterprises and organizations sit in are very software centric, right? So now what do we talk about it then, right? Application becomes a center of everything that any organization does today. Then you talk about security posture management, right? You can put an asterisk and say SPM on anything, and when you talk about it, application security posture management is a lot more relevant today than it was probably a couple of years ago, right? So as companies rely more and more on application and software to deliver what they are committed to delivering to their customers, the application security posture management becomes very vital into the ecosystem to ensure that you're not only measuring, but you're also managing and communicating and able to handle that posture to the level that you want it to be.
Yeah, and I think you kind of you put a really good point there. Is like you could put an asterisk in front of SPM for kind of like anything, right? CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management, is one component of your application. If your application is deployed to the cloud, it is a component of that. Same is true with data security posture management. Of course, your application is going to be using data. Do I have the appropriate tooling encapsulated there? When we start thinking beyond the software that we're producing, we now start thinking about software supply chain. So this is where your SBOMs come into place and disclosures. All of this kind of rolls up underneath that world of what is an application, whether I'm building it myself, whether I'm leveraging somebody else's, either directly through a COTS, commercial off-the-shelf kind of technology, or I'm embedding that technology in through a Java library or even an API. I've got all of this big ecosystem of a whole variety of different, in essence, scanners that are providing sources of data, which is both vulnerabilities, but also findings. And I view that application security traditionally was very weakness focused and now really is blending weaknesses and vulnerabilities, because a vulnerability always has a stronger relevance. If we've got a CVE that translates back to the code through SCA, then kind of like we have to start connecting all of these pieces together. How do you see, kind of like looking at it from a CISO's perspective, how do you look at that diversity of tooling that's out there, and how do I try bringing all of that together? Is that a problem, or can I treat these things as siloed environments?
Yeah, it's a very good point that you make, Mark. I think traditionally when you talked about application weaknesses, you're talking about code deficiencies from a security perspective, right? But that doesn't cut it anymore, right? Now you talk about application weakness. It's not just code. It is the container. It's the virtualized environment. It is the data that it relies on. It is the training material that it needs to work on, right? And it's the logic behind it, algorithms and so many and so forth, right? So I think it is very essential that the ASPM becomes a superset that kind of gets input from your CSPM, your DSPM, and any other SPMs into it, right? So that's where I think application security posture management has got, I would probably say, a leading advantage in terms of how to drive security posture in any organization, in any environment, right? You're absolutely right. I think we have to start moving away. We have way too many, in my opinion, at least personally speaking, right? We have way too many scanners, way too many ways of measuring all sorts of weaknesses, right? And when you have all of this stuff, I don't think so. You need another capability to tell you how weak you are, right? And then you know what? When you take a step back and look at it, right, you would probably come to that conclusion that all of these tools have a lot of overlap too, right? Whoever is measuring and scanning, oh, there's like 80% almost similar stuff that they would tend to reflect on or shine the light on, right? Where we need to start to focus on, how do we collate all of this stuff? And when it is collated, is it 1 + 1 is equal to 2 or 1 + 1 is equal to 3? A lot of times I would argue 1 + 1 is equal to 3, right? And the reason I would say that is it's the exponential impact or the magnified impact that these weaknesses coming in from multiple sources have, right? But then where do you pull this whole thing together and look at it, right? I think that's kind of where this correlation of information to reflect back on the risk, and that risk translated back into areas that companies have to address comes into play, right? So I think it also gives you that opportunity to not differentiate from, hey, either it is a code deficiency or it doesn't matter what sources that revealed it. Was it a code review? Was it a static analysis, dynamic analysis? It doesn't really matter, right? It kind of shows you what is at risk and what deficiency is driving that risk, and what might be my remediation to that deficiency that I have uncovered.
Yeah, and it is like you've hit the nail on the head, right? There are already all of these scanners out there, right? You're not going to be able to improve your posture by just bringing in another scanner. Now, that being said, the reason why there is so many is that it's a diverse ecosystem. Different scanners are better at doing different things. So what you need is a way to really bring all of that data and correlate it all together, so I can get my centralized view, so I can get a centralized view of kind of what my posture looks like, so that I can leverage those different sensors to prioritize and understand the business risk, but also understand where I can focus the most effort to get the biggest ROI of that effort. And you using these different techniques can help me identify that if I've found a vulnerability in my cloud container cloud containerized environment, I can trace that back to an SCA. I can trace it back to the source code, and it really helps with remediation and ownership assignment as well. So being able to bring all of that data together, recognizing that you're not going to get it all from one place, but
Right.
also being able to make sure that they provide additional value. Because you're right, just bringing in another scanner to replace something that you've already got or overlap with something you already got, it's kind of pointless. You want to get value out of the tools that you've already got in place and you're already
Yeah,
leveraging.
yeah. I mean, I think we're at an inflection point, right? Because a long time ago, we didn't know what our weaknesses are. We were, kind of, flying blind to some extent. Now we have a lot of that stuff. So I wouldn't. This is part of a natural evolution for companies to have more visibility, by using multitude of tools, which kind of shines the light on any blind spots in any nook and corner of your estate, right? But once you do that, you can't stop there, right? I mean, I think you need to now go back into, you have two steps to think about, right? One, what am I going to do with all this data, and how am I going to optimize and normalize this data so that I can make it more actionable? So you need to have mechanisms and tools in place and platforms in place to be able to do that. One. Two, you can also go back and say, what are these source tools that are efficient for me, and where do I optimize, right? And there's no one answer for every single company, right? Like, every company and every organization should have to look at it and says, I have 18 or 22 tools. Which ones are optimal for me? Which ones, are starting to yield it, return of diminishing value, right? So there's two things that companies, in my opinion, us standing in this inflection point, there's two things that they need to be thinking about is, one, how do I correlate all of this data and make meaning out of it and be more actionable in a very targeted way? And also go back and optimize my capabilities in the finding ways as well, right? So
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's a key thing here is like ASPM really isn't another tool. It's a program, it's an approach. And what you need to be able to do is facilitate that, leveraging the tools that you have in place. Where does it fit? Well, clearly it touches many different parts of the ecosystem. It touches vulnerability management because we're now focused on vulnerabilities that are associated with the applications. It touches traditional application security tooling, which is typically more weakness focused. As you said, we've had that for like 20 years, but there was just such a mountain of stuff we didn't know where to start. Now, by being able to bring this data together, we can prioritize and correlate and focus target efforts to say, let's focus on the things which are impacting our organization the most. So, as always, Karthik, a great conversation, and I look forward to digging in deeper on this exactly thread with you in another episode. But for that, I think we're at time for today. So with that being said, thank you everybody for watching. As always, click like, subscribe. Will be information there, right, where you can learn more about ArmorCode's ASPM solution and how we can help with exactly this problem. Karthik, thank you again for your time, man. I really appreciate it as always.
absolutely. Thanks for having me, Mark, on your show. Take care.
All right, take care. Goodbye.
Bye.